are entering the amazing experience of Breaking Chains, where we explore the deeper truths of addiction, depression, PTSD, prison reform, plant medicines, and all things spiritual. Where you are today is not your final destination. There are greater things in store for you. Together, we are breaking chains and building new pathways. Enter at your own risk, but you might be called to level up and face your own limiting belief structures.
Hello fam, how is everyone doing today? So I am so excited to be here with you. I am humbled, I am honored, I am privileged to share this moment of the eternal now with you, whether you're catching this live or whether you're catching it on a replay. It is your moment of now, and I am honored that you would spend it watching and sharing this moment with me. I hope that this interaction will leave you with your spirits lifted, hopeful for a better tomorrow, and curious about some of our own limiting belief structures and some of the things that we look at and the way we look at them. Today, I am simply here to introduce myself, to say hello, and to share what this podcast will be about and some of my story. So let's start with, what will this podcast be about? This podcast will be about all things spiritual. It will go into issues that deal with depression, anxiety, PTSD, addiction, prison reform, and the things that pertain to those issues. We will dive deep into understanding the brain and how we can heal our physical bodies, and how science and quantum physics is also showing us that we have and possess the power within our bodies to heal ourselves and to find freedom from ailments and things specifically to do for me with depression and addiction. And understanding some of those things will be just some of the topics that we will get into. What it will be really is the things that I have learned throughout my 43 years of life, the places that I have been, and the roads that I have traveled. It will be an opportunity for me to engage in conversations, having a guest come on and speak about the things that have been so important in my life, and overcoming the struggles, and really learning to understand the chemistry within our bodies, to break down the belief systems of religion, and to understand what really ultimately has been my healing journey and my awakening process. And hopefully in sharing that path, and bringing guests on that will speak about their paths, we can help people heal, awaken, go through the process of awakening, and really become the best version of themselves. Ultimately breaking the chains that keep us held in stagnant energies, in limiting belief systems and structures, and anything else that tries to put a chain around our neck. We want to break those chains and step into a greater purpose, because that's ultimately what it's about. Ultimately recognizing that there is purpose inside of you. There is a calling inside of you. We all were meant for so much, and to live in that passion and that purpose is ultimately what I hope to share and really allow people to step into. So I want to share a little bit about my story. I want to just give you a backdrop to who I am, and allow me to really just share from a vulnerable stance and share the path that has brought me to this moment. I mean, how did Jeff Walsh get to this moment of starting a podcast named Breaking Chains? How did Jeff Walsh get to this moment of becoming a life coach and an intuitive spiritual healer coach, and starting his own website, jeffwalshbreakingchains.com? And how did Jeff Walsh get to the place where he is now starting creating meditations and doing things for people to help them break free? So I want to go back to when I was born. I was born to Karen Walsh and John Walsh in 1977. And my father was in the Air Force. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, basically. She worked some side jobs and things like that. But they were both 20 years old when they had me. And so they were very young. And, that was kind of played a big part in my childhood. Having parents at that young of an age, creates sometimes struggles for the process of being raised. My father was in the Air Force, like I said, and he was stationed quite a few places throughout the country for the beginning stages of my life. I was born in Caribou, Maine. We then transferred to Honolulu, Hawaii, and my brother and sister, who are twins, were born there. And then we went to Albuquerque, New Mexico, a few other spots, and then we wound up back where my mom and dad were raised, which is New Jersey. And ultimately, New Jersey was where I was raised. It's what I consider my home. The first few years, of my life, they were interesting. Again, my parents being so young and really just kind of struggling to live. It was always a struggle financially, things like that. We lived in some areas in southern New Jersey when I was very young, and it wasn't the best of locations. And again, with my father being in the Air Force as a firefighter and doing double shifts and things like that, he wasn't around a lot. And then my mom tried to obviously manage 3 young children. And let's say I'm a little bit of a rebel, so I was always out and about, running around the little complex in Toms River, New Jersey that I grew up in. Actually, I remember the name of it. It was called Holiday on the Bay in Toms River, New Jersey. And this was the first time that I was introduced to trauma. I was probably 6-7 years old, in that range, maybe 8. And me and a couple of my friends, like we always did, we were out running around in the little complex, causing trouble, I'm sure, doing little boy things, riding bikes, and just being carefree. And one of the neighbors to my friend's apartment came up to us. This man must have been, I'm going to say, in his late 20s, early 30s. And he introduced us to a game. And this game was sexually oriented. And it was my introduction to being sexually abused and molested as a child. And now looking back, and understanding energy and understanding so many things, what this did was it stripped me of my innocence. Because from that point forward, it was Playboy magazines, it was smoking cigarettes, it seemed like I became this chaotic kid immediately. I wound up, trying to have sex with my friend's sister. Again, I'm 8 years old, and you know, it just opened me up to these sexual experiences that, you know, aren't meant for 8 year olds. And the trauma, although I may not have understood it at that time, was more impactful than I really fully understood. And so, what that did is it really, again, like I said, it opened me up to sexuality at a very young age, and it created just bad habits in those types of experiences. So I became sexually active very young. And again, understanding what I know about energy now, and understanding what I know about trauma, I am fully aware that this was the beginning of creating some serious deep wounds and trauma in my life. And then you add just a mom and dad who loved us dearly, but they were young. They both came from traumatized households themselves. My mom came from an abusive father who was an alcoholic, who she found cheating on my grandmother, who then divorced. And then also my father came from, my grandfather was an alcoholic. Thank God he got clean in his 40s, 50s. So the last 20 years of his life that I knew of him, he was sober. So that was a blessing. But my father came from a rough, background. My grandfather was a cop in a town called Summit, New Jersey, and he was just hard nosed. My father was the oldest of five, and so there was a lot of pressure there. And I think both my mom and my father, they got married because they both wanted to leave the environment they were in. And so my father joined the Air Force, and then after leaving the Air Force, he struggled to get meaningful jobs throughout his life. And he suffered from PTSD. He suffered from his own issues, and it created a turmoil environment to grow up in. Also, my father, being a firefighter for some time, wasn't around a lot because he was at the station a lot. So it created a whirlwind of struggles. And so I found myself really kind of getting into things earlier than I probably should have, being sexually active by about 7th or 8th grade, like fully. And yeah, so that's kind of like, I don't have a lot of memories of my childhood. There was some more molestation in between, by a gentleman who was living with my parents at the time. It happened to me and my sister. The memories are difficult in that process, but I understand that it's crazy because he also utilized it as a game, and because I had been exposed to this game prior to that, it seemed normal, and it's sad. I truly believe that sexual abuse of a child is, if not the greatest crime against humanity, definitely one of the top ones, because it takes away the innocence of that child, and it opens them up to energy bonds and trauma bonds that may take a lifetime sometimes to break, especially if you don't understand it. And they definitely played a huge impact in my psyche when I got older and started to struggle with depression and addiction. So what transitioned from there is up to about fourth grade, this was kind of my life. It was kind of traumatic. We moved from place to place, kind of all around. Not a lot of grounding, not a lot of security in the sense of where we lived. We lived in one place and another, and so there's all this bouncing around. And then finally, we landed in a small town, New Providence, New Jersey, in a very small, secluded suburban town, very nice town, middle class town, and I found that around fourth, fifth grade, I started to excel in football and baseball, and I became a pretty good athlete, and I really found like something that I was passionate about, something that I was good about, something I was good at, and I became a excellent athlete, and that really helped me. It helped me transition from some of the chaos into the normality. And what I found was that I found self-worth in these sports. I found that they somehow validated who I was. They gave me a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sense of accomplishment, and it really helped me grow and escape some of that beginning traumatic stuff. And so over the next few years, I excelled in sports and social life, and through high school, really ultimately the same thing. I became a standout athlete in football, basketball, track. I wound up eventually just focusing in on football and track, and I became an all-state football player, became an all-American in track, and so these were really validating accomplishments in my life, and I found a lot of, like I said, a lot of value and worth in that, and it became really the identity of my ego, of who I was. This was who I was. I was, an excellent athlete. This is who I was. This is what I was known for. This was what I was known by, and really accepted as well, because I lived in this like middle class to upper class town, and I didn't come from money. My parents, I like to say all the time that my parents were one of few families, if not the only one that I knew, who actually didn't own a house. We rented an apartment, a 2-story apartment. We always struggled, and I was always aware of that. And so being excellent at sports helped me fit into a crowd that maybe otherwise I might not have felt like I fit in. And then, of course, there was a core of my friends that a lot of us came from similar backgrounds, tougher backgrounds. Our families weren't, as we like to look at it, as the cookie cutter family. It was a little bit different for us, and we always bonded together. I call some of these people still friends to this day, and I'm more aware of why we were able to connect, and really have a special bond, because in a lot of ways we came from similar childhoods where things weren't maybe as easy, and not to say that anyone else had it easy, but it was just different. And so as I began to excel in these sports and really succeed, it like I said, it became my identity. And really ultimately, this is where my life started to kind of really have ramifications and struggles. Was it was my senior year, and my father and mother were always arguing, and didn't really, I always stuck up for my dad, but what I realized was that there was an issue. And one day I came home from football practice, and I'll never forget it. I was walking up the stairs, and my father came storming down the stairs, and I'm like, "Yo, what's going on, Dad? Like, what's the deal?" And he's like, ah, and he just walks past, and I'm like, all right, whatever. So I walk upstairs, and my mom and my brother and my sister are crying and screaming and yelling, and I'm like, oh my goodness, what's going on? And so my mom was like, I'll tell you what's going on. Your father's a drug addict. And at this point in my life, I was still very like athletic minded, and like everything was sports, and so drugs were like for the people that we considered as burnouts or whatever, skate rats, like the stereotypical like things that we thought when we were in high school in the 90s. And so for me, because my father was basically like my best friend, we were very close, we're very much alike, and I kind of snapped. And I'll never forget, I started breaking everything in the house. I started punching walls, because that's how I responded then. I had a very bad temper. And once it was fused, it was explosion. And so that's what happened, and I exploded. And then I just went on with life and kept that kind of buried and suppressed, and ignored the reality of it, and kind of just stayed away from my house. Began to drink more, began to just not be home. And that was really, another traumatic thing that became a part of who I was, that just kind of embedded into my body, my psyche. And then on top of that, my senior year, we were really good in football, and being the captain and kind of the person that carried that team my senior year, we had a lot of expectations of winning a state championship. It was a childhood dream for me, literally. Like, this was my dream from fourth grade on. We went and watched high school football games, and it was like if you know anything about like Texas football, this is what New Providence, New Jersey football was like growing up for me. It was a very, very big part of the community. And so for me, winning a state championship, we had lost my junior year in the state championship and my sophomore year in the state championship. So senior year, it was all about that. And this was like going to be my big break. This was going to be it for me. This was going to put me, up here for the Division I schools to be looked at, everything like that. And we lost in the first round of the playoffs in an upset by 2 points. And I won't go into the details of that. But long story short, in the meeting room afterwards, I was blamed for the loss, because I had dropped an interception pass. And I was, a senior in high school. I mean, I was already traumatized by the loss. This was a life dream and a childhood dream. And, to then be blamed by the people that you respected and honored as your coaches, to be blamed for that loss was heartbreaking. And this is really where my life began to become a struggle. Depression in my life became a reality. I found it very difficult to get up in the mornings to go to school. So much so that I was failed first and I think second period because I had like over 100 absences. My mom would go to work, my dad would go to work, and I just wouldn't get up and go to school. And this became an issue, and I couldn't get out of bed. Excuse me. I don't understand really what it was at that time in my life. I didn't understand. I just thought I was being lazy or tired. And I now understand that it was the beginning of depression in my life. And so, outside of doing that, I was always drinking. And I gave up on my senior year of track. and I was a standout track athlete. I was an All-American my junior year. I was an All-State track athlete, one of the best quarter milers in the entire state of New Jersey. I took third in the Meet of Champions my junior year in the indoor Meet of Champions, which is an incredible accomplishment in track for coming from such a small school. And then my senior year, it was I just did everything to get by because I didn't care anymore. I was depressed, and I was drinking, and I started smoking pot, and I just stopped going to school. I was smoking cigarettes. I didn't care anymore. It was almost like a part of me died, and it was because of my identity was so wrapped into that football player. And so fast forward, it's a week before graduation, and really ultimately I had been drinking a lot. I had started doing acid quite a bit, and we had started smoking pot. So a lot of us just started experimenting with drugs, and I was drunk, and I was at a party, and I walked into a bathroom, and someone was cutting up cocaine, and I'm like, what is that? Well, next thing you know, I'm sniffing cocaine for the first time a week before high school graduation, and it literally lit a fire to 20 years of struggle with speed, amphetamines, coke, all sorts of drugs. And it was a moment in time that I wasn't in a good place, and I didn't understand anything about depression. I didn't understand anything about life. In the means, I was 18 years old, and that started a 3-year or so complete debacle of life. I was sniffing cocaine, doing everything I could to do cocaine as much as I could, whether it was stealing money from my parents, if it was stealing money from someone, whether it was taking my parents' car out of the driveway at 2 a.m. so I could drive to a city in New Jersey to buy cocaine. Whatever I could do to get cocaine. I went to play college football on a scholarship at a Division II school. I wound up quitting, and even as I was starting as a true freshman on special teams, I was the only freshman playing, but I was just so depressed. I remember, like, literally, I would stay in bed. I would go out all night. I would drink and party all night long, and then I couldn't get out of bed. I wouldn't go to class, and I would just barely get up in time to go to football practice. And eventually, I just couldn't do that anymore. I wound up getting in trouble in gambling, and I went home for Thanksgiving break and just never went back. And at this point, my life was a complete disaster. I was a failure in every aspect that I could possibly think of in my life. And cocaine and drinking and partying and all of that became a almost daily habitual issue for a couple of years. It was a struggle. It was a big struggle. And there was a couple times I thought I was having a heart attack. I mean, it was just really bad. And it just created this like whirlwind of depression, addiction, and turmoil and failure, and the thoughts of who I was, about what I thought about myself, just continued to grow. I didn't like who I was. Excuse me. And so, excuse me. So that battle began, continued on, and then it switched to ecstasy. So it went from cocaine to ecstasy, and I found myself in a new love, a love with ecstasy and special K, or otherwise known as ketamine, and going to clubs in New York City. And this was really actually kind of a saving grace, because I wasn't driving to, bad places at 2 in the morning to buy cocaine, and like really going and stealing from people and just all that crazy stuff that cocaine does. Now I was more involved in like almost like community, like you did you had fun with people, you went to the clubs. It was more like there was no like there was just, the addiction wasn't the same, but it was creating depression in my life. It was creating issues in my life. It just wasn't as bad as the cocaine was. And this just went on again for a little while, and I'll never forget it. This was my first awakening and my first experience with a presence that was greater than me. And it was a night after the clubs, and me and my then girlfriend, we were sitting in a hotel room, and this presence that I had never experienced, that I had never felt, filled the room. And it was so profound and euphoric and heavenly. And I just knew within me that God, that supernatural understanding of God was real. It was this moment in time that transformed something within inside of me forever. I knew that I knew that I knew for the first time in my life and understood God. And what happened was, because of this experience, because I had this encounter with this presence, I turned to what I understood God to be. Now, my mom and my sister were already what we consider born-again Christians. And for a very long time, a few years, I would always tell my mom that, listen, I don't want any part of that. Just keep it away from me. And I hated going to church if she ever tried to make us. Like, I didn't want any part of it. And I wound up actually calling my mom that night and said, Mom, I'm coming to church with you tomorrow. I think it was Saturday night. And I'm like, I'm coming to church with you tomorrow. And I went with my mom and my girlfriend at the time to church. And for the next few weeks, I went to church, and what I began to have were these mystical experiences where I experienced the presence of God, where I experienced this cleansing, this euphoric presence, and it was undeniable. And what that did in my life was it changed everything, because it was an experience. It wasn't like, hey, this God is real, like, because I went to CCD and I went to Catholic, I was confirmed and all that stuff my whole life, went to Mass, but I had never had an encounter. And I was having these mystical encounters where it created a hunger inside of me so deeply to know this God, because I had experienced it. And so what I did for the next few years was all in, because that's the type of personality I have. I was all in. Whatever they told me, whatever it was, I was all in. And that's what I did. I was 22 years old. I stopped having sex. I threw all my music out the windows and only bought Christian music. I stopped watching TV and watching movies and watching, things that they told me were bad. I only read the Bible. And I went after this. I would pray by myself. I would go into the woods and I would pray, and I would bring my Bible and I would read the Bible, and I would do what they told me to do, like fast, pray, seek God. And it created this hunger and thirst from inside of me to know God. Like, that's what I needed. I needed to know God. And what I found was that, I was also told to stop hanging out with the people that I grew up with, that they were all bad people. They were bad influences. They would show me the scripture in Proverbs that says, they wait and thirst for you, and they painted a picture of these lifelong friends that I had, that they were somehow bad people. They weren't bad people now looking back. I'm still these are still like brothers to me in my life now today. They were just like me. They were going through life. They were having experiences. Most of them to this day are much further along than I am, and they're doing really well now. You know, it was, but what it did was it created this like struggle inside of me because I had had this encounter. So I was believing everything I was taught. Everything I was told I was believing because that was what I understood God to be. God was this faith, this doctrinal belief. This was what God represented because I had an encounter and now I had to follow everything they told me. And it created struggles because I still wanted to hang out with my lifelong friends. But I was loving the people that I met in the church. I mean, I met some of the most amazing people in this church. They were it's still to this day, I believe they are some of the most amazing human beings. But it created this conflict. And so every once in a while I would go back and, I'd hang out with my friends and, we'd go to a club in New York City. And what happened was I would start having these different experiences in these clubs. Like I would do an ecstasy pill, and now I felt like I was like shooting energy and love out of my being. Like I'd be on the dance floor and I'd be like shooting love from my hands and shooting like energy, and and then I'd go and then I'd come down, and the next day would come and I'd go to my youth pastor and I'd be like, oh, I went to the club and I took ecstasy and I'm so bad. God must be so mad at me. Like I'm such a wretch. I can't believe this. And he would tell me, just ask for forgiveness. And I would cry on the altar before God. And I'd say, forgive me, God, because I was so bad. I was so dirty. I couldn't believe that I did this. And then I'd ask my Christian friends, what was going on when I was feeling like I'm on the dance floor in the club in New York City, I'm on drugs, and I'm feeling like I'm shooting love out of my body and out of my being? And they'd be like, I don't know, like, that's kind of weird, dude. Like, you were on drugs. Like, how? That's not good. Like, and so I didn't understand, and I thought, yeah, you're right. I mean, I was doing drugs. How bad am I? Like, I can't do that. And so I had this issue, it's like I was having these experiences, but I was being told, and my belief systems were creating a dichotomy with that reality. And so what happened was it just created this habitual struggle of feeling like every time I messed up and I went out and I hung out with my friends, that God was mad at me. Then I'd stay 6 months and I wouldn't go out and I wouldn't do anything and I'd be good. And then, boom. And then I'd have to go through the same cycle over and over. And this seemed to happen for a few years of my life. And it just really wore on me. It was like, I don't understand. I'm doing everything you tell me. I'm praying more than anybody I know. I'm studying the Bible more than anybody I know. I'm seeking God more than anybody I know. Like I'm the one at church service who's dancing, and I'm hallelujah, and I'm speaking in tongues, and I'm prophesying, and then I have these struggles. Well, it's the devil. So, it was like this struggle of like God and the devil and and this and that. And it just finally wore on me. And, I remember this moment specifically. I was driving in my car listening to a Linkin Park song that's basically, and I can't remember the exact song, but it's basically like, no matter what I do, it's not good enough for you. And I got mad at God. And I was like, what's the point? You're supposed to be like able to change me, and I'm still having these struggles, and I'm feeling like a loser, and people at church now think I'm like this bad person because I can't get my shit together, so I can't win on both sides. I'm not doing well, and I was just like done with it. And so I stopped going to church. I left church. The church itself was having like these crazy divisions. People were fighting. The leadership was leaving. it was just chaos. And I was like, what the heck is this? Like, it doesn't even make sense, God. You're supposed to like deliver me and set me free, and I'm not. And it was just this inner struggle, this inner turmoil. Like, my subconscious was just going through nightmares. So I wound up leaving church and just kind of started living life. And I was kind of partying on and off, but not really. Once in a while, got a good job. Then I moved, and I just kept doing this. Like, I got a good job, and then I moved, and then I was gonna move to Florida, and I moved to Florida, and then I'd start doing drugs again, and I'd mess everything up, and then I'd leave. And so that's what happened in my life. It was just this like continual thing. Like, no matter where I went, I brought me. I brought my own inner belief systems. I brought what I thought of myself. I brought my habitual behaviors and patterns of life that my subconscious and my trauma had created. And then so finally I'm in Florida. And I go on this binge because my grandfather's dying with one of my uncles, and it's just like crazy. We were supposed to go to Jersey to be with my grandfather, and my uncle wound up keeping me with him in Florida, and we went on like this 3-day binge. And I had just like started a new job in Florida and just got an apartment, and life just fell apart, and I fell into a deep dark depression. And so, like I did with anything in depression, whenever I fell into depression, if I couldn't deal with it, it was that dark, and I would just somehow like leave. I would just get up and leave, because that's how I dealt with depression. If I was getting into these like dark depressions, the only thing I could do is like get up and leave wherever I was, and it seemed to like get me through the darkness. And so I did that numerous times. And this time in Florida, I happened to my now ex-wife, I happened to had met her, and I called her and I said, I'm moving to San Diego. I need a place to stay. Do you mind if I stay with you for a little bit? And she's like, okay, yeah, no problem. So I wind up just packing all my stuff into my car in Florida, and driving to California, and going to live with my now ex-wife Kelly. And we wound up, long story short, we wind up, getting serious, and getting engaged and getting married. And I wound up really starting to be successful in corporate America, and I was doing well, even though I still had these like the struggles with addictive behaviors. I would still find myself once a year doing cocaine, or taking some sort of pills, or drinking too much. But it was kind of manageable. Also, during this process, once we got married, I wound up going to a psychiatrist, and I got prescribed Prozac medicines, and Wellbutrin, and some anti-anxiety medications, and those kind of helped curb the impulsivity from my gambling and my drug addictions. And it kind of just really, that's what it did. It curbed my impulsivity. It also gave me some more energy in my life, and it seemed to allow me to be more functional, and not have as many like depressive battles where I would be stuck in bed for a few days, not willing or wanting to face life. And so that happened, and life was semi good, except I seemingly was dead inside. I was I was still trying to live life on life's terms. I was a Pop Warner head football coach, which was a beautiful passion. I loved it. I became a head coach for 8th graders for 3 years, and we wound up, almost every season making it to a championship game. The last team I think I coached, we were one game away from the Pop Warner Super Bowl, and really I found a passion in doing this. This was something that I really loved, and I loved having an influence on these young kids' lives, and I was good at it. And then at the same time, I was also selling software and hardware for a corporation, and really started succeeding in financial stability, and really making some, 6-figure incomes and doing well. We bought a house in San Diego when I was 27, I think 28 years old. And my now again Kelly, she was able to leave her job, and we started doing well financially and things like that. My first son Mason was born in 2007. My second son Dylan was born in 2009, and life was, it was manageable. It was good. I mean, you know my relationship and my marriage was a struggle because I inside had a lot of struggles, because I mean, you can tell the beginning part of this story, all of the unhealed trauma that never got dealt with, all of those things were still bottled up inside of me, and the confliction with the God thing was still there. Like, I always felt like I wasn't living life in and I wasn't loved by God anymore because I wasn't like part of a church, and I wasn't going to church. And so I always had like this constant guilt and this constant shame and this constant condemnation. I always felt like I was a bad person because I wasn't doing this and I wasn't doing that. And you add all of that together with the realities of all the trauma that I had gone through, and all the drug use and the abuse and the gambling addictions and all of that, and it created for a struggle inside, a constant struggle of not knowing who I was, not knowing anything about who I was, not knowing what was true and what wasn't true, what I believed and didn't believe, and really not loving me, not liking me. But I tried every day to be the best person I could. I tried to love my wife. I tried to, be the best father I could. I was a good father for my children, I think, in the first, few years that I was there. And I wasn't the best husband, that's for sure. But I tried to be a good husband. I tried to care. I tried to love her, and I don't think I did a good job because I didn't love me. Ultimately I didn't love me, so how could I love her the way that she needed to be loved? I couldn't be present. I couldn't be present with myself. I could definitely not be present with her. And so it created issues, and we were in, constant therapy and things like that. And eventually I just, I sabotaged the relationship. I wasn't happy with a lot of things, but, it was more about what was going on inside of me than anything. And because I wasn't, happy, I just sabotaged the relationship. And finally, eventually, I pushed her to the limits of, between my opiate addiction that I started in 2010, and then just like going out and not coming home because I was going out and doing drugs again, and leaving her with my 2 young children to be worried about where I was. I don't blame her. I wasn't a good man at this point in my life. I wasn't a good husband, and it's because I wasn't good to me, and it's because I didn't know who I was. It's because I thought I was a bad person because what I was told about God, and then all the trauma that was still built up inside of me that had never been fully dealt with or understood. And so we get separated, and this is where life really kind of takes a crazy turn for me again. We go through, I was just looking at the clock here, how long we've been. We go through a separation, and I immediately, I immediately turned to severe drug addiction again. Immediately. So we got separated, and I began to do a lot of cocaine and party, and, was just lost. And I wound up, for our court hearings, testing positive for cocaine use. And they took my kids away from me in custody. They gave my ex legal and custodial 100% rights. I snapped. Instead of managing it well, I just snapped. And had I been in a stable mindset, I would have realized that it would just take a month or two for me to get clean and make sure my life was good, and everything would have been back to the way it should have been. But I wasn't in a good place, and I had literally just stopped taking the Prozac and the Wellbutrin that I had been taking for 4 or 5 years. I just stopped taking it. I was taking the max dose of Prozac and the max dose of Wellbutrin, and I was drinking and doing cocaine and just a wreck. And so rationally thinking wasn't possible for me. I was living in a bad state, mentally, emotionally, physically, everything. And so after I lost custody, because I had got a dirty urine and actually a hair follicle test. They tested me on my hair follicle test and came up dirty for cocaine. So from that point forward, I was just, again, chaos. I wound up winning $50,000 like the next day at a casino playing blackjack over the next 3 days. Basically, I was put in a suite in the casino, and at this point, partying with cocaine and alcohol and all sorts of craziness. And I was introduced to methamphetamine, and that was it. The minute I smoked meth, in that moment, my life changed. After smoking that, within 30 days, I lost my job. I covered the entire Western United States for a software company. I lost that. I was fired for the first time. I got arrested for the first time in my life for a drug possession. I became homeless. I lost the $50,000 that I won, plus probably $40,000 to $50,000 of my own money on a 401k, out of my 401k, plus another. I probably lost $150,000, $200,000 within a couple months, and I was living in motels, in my car, sleeping in my car. My gambling addiction became severe, probably worse than my drug addiction. And my meth addiction became a daily, habitual addiction, and it just became chaos. During this process, I tried to slit my wrist and commit suicide one day. I was then put into a mandatory 5150, which is a mandatory psych evaluation for 3 days. Life wasn't good. And I was lost. I was lost in the way I thought, my ability to be rational or to in any way do the right thing. I tried to get clean. I got clean for like a month and right back to using. And so eventually I met a couple people who were counterfeiting money, and this was how they were surviving on the streets. And they taught me how to make the $20 bills on a $100 printer, and that's what I did. I began to make fake $20 bills so that we could make enough money to have drugs, a night to sleep in a motel, and usually like $100 that I could take to a casino every night. I would never take fake money to the casino or anything like that. We would go to the store and buy French fries, or we would buy these gift cards or whatever we did that allowed us to have actual cash to get the hotel room. And it was craziness. Looking over your shoulder every minute, worried, and eventually it caught up. Eventually I got a call. I'm in a hotel room. It's my son's birthday. It's March 31st of 2012. And I pick up the phone call on a burner phone, and he tells me, hey, this is so-and-so from the Secret Service, and your name has come up in the investigation of counterfeit bills. And my heart starts beating, and of course, I'm scared, and I just blow them off basically, and continue on with my addiction and continue on with my stupidity. And eventually, I get arrested, and then I get arrested again, and the second time and this just went on for about a year-ish. I don't know exactly how long. I lost time of the frame, not even a year, but eventually I get arrested on a drug charge in San Diego, and while in there for that, the feds indicted me on counterfeiting money in South Dakota. And so I was flown back to South Dakota, and I was sentenced to 13 months in federal prison for counterfeiting. I think it was $1,100 is what I was indicted on. And this began this would have been I got indicted, I think, January of 2013. And I finally got out fully it would have been June of 2016. So about a 3.5 year process and journey of going in and out of prison, and my addiction growing worse. So I went to prison, and I got out. And when I got out, what I realized was that I was a convicted federal felon with a counterfeiting charge, so a fraud charge. And my life was never going to be the same in my mind. I couldn't see past the struggle. And trying to get clean was nearly impossible because of the depression. I had no hope for a better tomorrow. I didn't see how I was ever going to be a success. I didn't ever see how I was going to do anything meaningful with my life. I didn't see how I could possibly go on. Like, all I saw was the past. All I saw was what I did yesterday, which was now creating this moment in now that I couldn't let go of. And so I got out of prison the first time, and within a few months I started using again, and I went on the run from the feds, and they sent U.S. Marshals looking for me, and my drug addiction got worse, and I began shooting meth and heroin intravenously, and my delusions and my chaos and everything just grew. It became chaotic in every way, shape, and form. I was broken to the core of who I was. I was scared. I was never thinking I would ever be the same. I was thinking about, driving to Mexico and never coming back. And the only reason I didn't do that was because I couldn't stomach the fact of, if I did that I would never see my children again. Like, I just couldn't do it. I literally was so close to driving through the Mexican border and never coming back to the United States again. And this was the kind of thinking, but like so many other times through this journey, the picture of my children in my head is the only thing that got me through it, other than the grace of God. And obviously that is what kept me alive, is really grace and love. But the picture of that and my children are truly the part that kept me alive and kept me from doing anything that that would have been life-changing. I mean, going all the way, just wild thinking. And so this process, while I was on the run was chaos. I mean, just absolute chaos. Sleeping in rental trucks and just, doing everything I could to get enough money to gamble and do drugs, and just bad and brokenness. And that's what it ultimately was. It was like I was so afraid of the depression that I was willing to deal with the chaos of the addiction. Because depression and not being able to live scared the shit out of me. That was ultimately why I continued to use, because my life in my mind, without the drug and the chaos, was dead. There was nothing I could do. There was nothing I could build. There was nothing that I had no hope in that reality. So the depression and the hopelessness in the reality of sobriety, to me, was worse than the chaos and the addiction. And that's crazy when you think about that. It's really crazy when you think about the fact that, like, this chaos was actually better in my mind than the depression and the hopelessness. So you can imagine what the depression and the hopelessness actually feels like. To imagine that in my mind, because I was unwilling to go to that, proved that was worse in my mind than the addiction and the chaos of the drugs. I was so scared of the hopelessness. I was so scared of just laying in bed and not being able to get out of bed, and just that feeling of depression and hopelessness. That's ultimately why I continued to use. I didn't use because I wanted to have excitement and be on the run from the United States Marshals and be living in a chaotic life. I used and I went back to that path because the depression and the hopelessness was too much for me to burden. And so literally, instead of not living anymore, chaos was better. And so this happened, and then I got caught. I went back to prison for a couple months. And then I got out within a couple months again, trying to deal with life on life's terms. It didn't work. I started using again. And then boom, I was finally, I was in a Walmart parking lot, and I had been on the run again from the Marshals for a few months, intravenously shooting heroin and meth, just living chaotic. And things just started really unraveling. My delusions, my hallucinations. I mean, I was up for 4 or 5 times at a time sometimes, and it just became so much. I was losing my mind. I was losing everything that meant anything. If you haven't seen it, there's a picture of me on a lot of my posts. The moment I'm speaking about, this picture was taken that night. And you can see it in my eyes, you can see it in my countenance, you can see it in my face. You can see, when you look at that picture, not a bad man, not an evil man, a very, very broken man. See, that's one of the things, and why I'll be addressing prison reform, and why I'll be talking about the experiences of prison, and why I am going to be speaking about all the things that I've now learned through this journey, is because we don't have to allow people to get to that point. But when you look at that picture, and I want you to find that picture, and if you can't find it, let me know and I'll share it with you, and I'll figure out a way where I can post it for you to see. But what you see when you look at that man is a hurt, broken, distraught man that was lost. And that's what I was. I was broken, I was lost, I was scared. And I sat in this parking lot with this person that I had been with every time I was basically on the run for a couple of years. She was always with me for basically from like 2013 until the end. And I just couldn't go on anymore. And I'll never forget, I just said, God, I can't. I started crying. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I surrender. Like, the chaos and the addiction is too much now. I'm willing to deal with the depression and the ramifications. In my mind, that was the transition of creation for me. It was like I surrendered the need to be stuck in this chaos and this addiction, and knowing that I would have to deal with the pain and the consequences of what I had been doing. But that became the chaos became more and unburdenable. Like, I couldn't live in the chaos and the addiction anymore. So the depression and the hopelessness that I had and experienced before became something that I was now willing to go through and deal with, because I couldn't deal with the other thing anymore. And I surrendered. And literally within 10 minutes, someone's knocking on the car window in the Walmart shopping center where we usually slept all the time in our car, where we never got bothered. It's a cop. And this cop just says license and registrations. And at that moment, I knew, because I had a federal warrant for my arrest, I knew I was going back to prison. And the run was over. And that's what happened. I wound up going back to prison for 14 months this time, which became 12 months in the Fed. So I did 12 months. And in that process, I got myself in trouble in prison going through this whole process. And I wound up going into the SHU, which is the special housing unit where they put people when you get in trouble in prison. And I wound up spending 40 days in this SHU. And this was my true first beginning. Well, I shouldn't say first. It was really my second, because my first one was 20 years ago. But this was an awakening for me spiritually, where I began to understand unconditional love and grace and mercy, not only from God, but for me. Being able to finally accept who I was and love me where I was. And going through this 40 days in this SHU, so it was just me in a 10 by 10 self cell, and just really kind of going through that process. It was burdensome and liberating, and it really began to shift something inside of me, where the Spirit of God began to teach me things and open me up to things. And it was the beginning of my ultimate awakening process. And so I got out of that, and I got out of prison, and this takes us to about 2016, and it's been a journey of healing and wholeness. It's been a journey of mistakes, quite a few of them, unlearning habits, and learning new habits, unlearning beliefs and what I thought about God and what I understood about faith and religion and everything. One of the most profound things that has ever happened to me in my life to this day was in 2017. I was in Redding, California, and I was just seeking God. I was seeking, to live for God, to experience God, and I was still entrenched in my belief structures of the evangelical and Pentecostal type Christian beliefs. I was still, and that goes all the way back from when I first had my experience. All of those beliefs, the Bible that I know very well, the way I read it was still the same. I still believed that out of the 8 billion people on the earth, that only 2.2 billion of us would be going to heaven and everyone else would be going to hell. I no longer believe that. As a matter of fact, I think that's horrible to believe something like that, because it mischaracterizes the nature of love, especially unconditional love. But I was still in that charismatic, evangelical, Pentecostal mindset, dogmatic Christianity, and I had an experience. I had an experience where the energy inside of my body began to flow like a river. It started at my belly and it went all the way up into my head and through my hands. And what happened was this energy was surging through my body, vibrating so intensely. I literally felt like I could shoot energy from my hands like 500 feet. And this was just me. I was out, on a mountain walking around, and it just started to happen. And I was seeking God, of course, and I had been seeking God. I had been praying the prayer that says, God, grant me the spirit of wisdom and revelation and the knowledge of who you are, that the eye of my heart be flooded with light. This was the prayer I had been praying since that time that it was shown to me in prison, and I had memorized it and I had written it and I had known it so well. I prayed the prayers of Paul, that I would be rooted and grounded in love, able to understand and comprehend with all the saints what is the width and the length and the depth and the height, to know the love of Christ which surpasses all knowledge. This was my prayer day in and day out. And then I had this experience where the energy was flowing in me and through me, and my right in between my forehead, this started pulsating, and my brows, they were like vibrating, and my cheeks were vibrating, and everything was vibrating, and the top of my head felt like surging energy was just surging, and it was just energy. And I was crying, and it was like I was experiencing this euphoric yet unknown, scary kind of like, what is going on, and like all of my beliefs that I thought I knew like started coming out of me, and it was like, it was crazy. Everything that I thought I knew, everything I thought I believed, like it was just flowing. It was like something I can't even really fully explain. And this happened, and I was like, what is going on? And I remember asking someone, like, what could this possibly be? Because once it stopped, I asked the minister's wife, I'm like, I felt like the stuff shooting from my hands and this and that, and she didn't really have an answer. And I started searching on the internet, like energy, blah blah blah, and all I could find was like Kundalini stuff, and which is ultimately, it makes sense. And so I had this experience, and then again I had this experience. This time it was so intense that I literally thought I was dying. I was vibrating so intensely that I began to shake. And so I laid on my bed. I was in a motel room. I laid on the bed, and I was like, what is going on? And it was vibrating intensely, and it just felt like energy was surging through my body so intensely. And it changed everything in my life. Changed everything. Everything I believed. Everything I thought I knew crumbled. I was having a very serious spiritual awakening. And that was in 2017. And I went through some very difficult times in that process, where people that have known me through the Christian circles think I'm a heretic. They say that, what I teach is of the devil, because I talk about energy, and, I say that hell isn't real anymore. I talk about all of these things that began to open up to me it began to become so clear to me. Understanding that love above everything is what matters. Understanding that it's about energy and frequency, and understanding that we are pure light energy, and just really like going deep into, the understanding of the pineal gland and the crown and the energy sources in our body and quantum physics, and understanding like that we can heal our bodies. Listen, I had died twice. They had to restart my heart. I've done intravenous drugs. I've smoked cigarettes my whole life, and I'm telling you, my body and my essence is healing in ways that I'm shocked by. And it's only beginning. Understanding like the power of meditation and breath work, and being able to actually raise your energy, and to actually feel the raising of your energy, to actually be able to create and facilitate that, and to transform our minds, and to recreate our bodies and recreate our minds, and all of these things. Learning all of that while unlearning the fear of religion, the indoctrination, the mind control, the false teachings, the misunderstandings of the Bible, being read as a literal book. I could go on and on about the things that I've unlearned and the things that I've learned, and that's what this podcast will be about. That's what this platform will be about. It will be about me teaching and sharing what has healed me from severe depression, suicidal attempts, heroin and meth, intravenous addiction, going to prison, having my life stripped completely, being hopeless, lost, never thinking I was going to make it, and now getting to this place, starting my own business, starting my own podcast, almost finished with my first book, writing about things, sharing about things that I would have never thought I could be here. Understanding and teaching people what it means to manifest. Like, it's crazy that I'm doing this right now, because 6 months ago I would say it to people. I'd be like, yeah, watch me when I'm doing my podcast, and people would look at me, and inside of me I kind of like, yeah, right, Jeff. Like, but I was a passion, and like, look, here it is. You know what I mean? Like, here it is. I'm doing it. Why am I doing it? I'm doing it because I want to share my message. I want to share hope with people. I want to share that no matter what you've been through in life, there is hope. There is transformation. There is healing. There is restoration. And everything that you need is within you. My father gave me probably one of the greatest teaching moments that helped me finally realize and gain some hope. And that was two things. I realized, because one of my struggles was that I felt like I had missed out on my children's lives because I had messed up and I wasn't around because of my addictions and everything like that. So I felt like life was over, and I couldn't get a job. And my father and my mom, by helping me in my late 30s and early 40s, helped me see that my children are only 11 and 13. Like, I'm going to be a father to them forever. And gaining some perspective on the reality of that I'm 43 years old. I've got 50 years left of life, if not more, to do amazing things. I haven't even lived half of my life yet, probably, the way that we're living nowadays. And gaining that perspective was through seeing my mom and my dad help me. Also seeing my father, who, and I told you earlier, my father became an addict, but then he became a heroin addict, and then he wound up getting his life together and went back to school and became a drug and alcohol counselor. So his life gave me hope. And he told me, he said, Jeff, learn to take the local, not the express. And for me, that was profound, because I realized that I have to see life in the big picture. Experience the moment in the now and dream for the big picture. And it really gave me a clearer understanding of hope, that anything is possible. And that's true. Anything is possible. Anything. So that's what this podcast is going to be about. It's going to be for those that have gone through abuse. It's going to be for those that are struggling with depression or PTSD or anxiety or addiction. For those that are just feeling stuck in life, or at a job that maybe they don't want to be at, or in a relationship that maybe they know they shouldn't be in. Or looking for other alternatives for healing, like plant medicines and plant ceremonies, and what those are how those are beneficial for people, and understanding the science of quantum physics and how we can truly co-create our lives, and how we can tap into the quantum field and really retrain our bodies and understand our habits, understand the power of breath work and meditation, understanding the subconscious and the conscious mind, understanding how we can renew and transform our lives, and really stepping into our power, our authority as limitless beings, as spiritual beings, as energetic beings, and really living life with purpose and with deliberate creation and consciousness, and really walking in the authority and the power that we possess within who we are. Just because I don't really follow the dogmatic beliefs of religion anymore doesn't mean that I don't love Jesus still. I do. I still talk to Jesus. I just don't have the same beliefs. I don't have the same understanding. I believe that God is the all-powerful, pure light energy source, is God. And I believe that anything that creates fear or judgment is not from that source of pure light energy. And there's scriptures that say that, perfect love casts out all fear, for fear involves torment. God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. If you are teaching people that they're going to go to hell, you are creating a sense of fear. You are tormenting them in reality. Or they've had loved ones that have passed on that maybe didn't say a prayer called the sinner's prayer that doesn't even exist in the Bible, by the way. And now they're living in fear that their loved ones have gone to hell. Understanding that is understanding where that teaching came from, talking about Constantine and the Roman Empire and what really happened, and understanding the creation of the Bible and how it wasn't really even read by most people until just a couple hundred years ago, and understanding the power of indoctrination and mass control, and just really digging deep into allowing people to question what unconditional love looks like, because it's so much greater than we as humans really fully grasp. Unconditional love is just that. It's unconditional. One of the greatest things that helped me realize that love is so much greater, and really sort of opened my eyes to some struggles within doctrination and religious belief systems, was the belief that Christians hold the belief that Adam and Eve were in the garden and Eve ate of the apple, and that created original sin, and that we are all born into original sin because of that action, right? So because of that action, we are all born into original sin. Okay, fair enough. So then why, if you believe that Jesus is higher than Adam because he's God, then why what Jesus did, is that not automatic for everyone? Do you see the struggle in the contradiction of that reality? If Adam and Eve did something that created an automatic response for all of humanity, And yet Jesus came after that and came as the Savior of the world, as love. And he did something, just like Adam and Eve did something. Why, at this point, do you now not believe that what he did is automatic for all of humanity? If you really think about it, you can't answer that question, and it'll actually be a brain stumper. It will. And it will make you think about what you've been taught. It's a simple, profound truth. Outside of looking into the scripture, just the practical reality of looking at that truth. If Jesus is the second Adam, which means he's above and greater than, then why would his actions not supersede the actions of Adam and Eve? Love. Love is unconditional. And I won't even get into all of the things about the metaphorical realities of the Bible and allegorical understandings of the Bible and understanding how to read it literary versus literal. And we'll get into all that stuff throughout these shows and really dig deep into the esoteric truths and dig deep into plant medicines. We will dig deep into the prison system and the justice system that we currently have in place and why it needs reform and how we can have reform. We will get into plant medicines and pharmaceutical medicines and the science and what is being revealed and found now. We will get into all things spiritual. We will get into healings and readings and all sorts of amazing, beautiful things. I'm going to have some amazing guests on, and I just hope that you can join me on this journey of self-discovery, of inner healing, and be a part of Jeff Walsh Breaking Chains. I would appreciate your support. I would appreciate your subscription and following and sharing of this to people that you think it might help and it might benefit. Again, this is just my introduction about who I am, where I came from, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and what is important to me and what will be spoken about. And a lot of times I will be going live, so it will be interaction as well. And we will just enjoy the ride and, have an amazing time doing it and get to know each other and create hopefully some sort of community as well. And I just want to let you know that if you're in the midst of struggle with addiction or depression or suicidal ideations, or you're struggling with your belief in God or your understanding of God or what religion has taught you versus what maybe you're feeling or understanding, I just want you to know that it's okay. You're not alone. And I am evidence and proof that there is life on the other side. There is hope. That was the hardest thing for me, was to find hope. Hope is what we need. And I am your hope today. I am your voice of hope because I am, or I was, where you might be. And I am now where you might want to go. And so hold on to that. Hold on to the ability that if I can get to where I'm at, so can you. We all have the God within us, the ability and strength to get through what we're going through. And what you're going through will become your greatest message, will become your greatest lesson, will become the power that you have within you as an overcomer, and it will allow you to become a healer of those things that you overcome. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing once we can find the hope to see past the darkness. So I just want to say thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you. I love you. And I am here because I just want to share my journey, because I know there are so many that are where I was in some facet or form. I love you and I appreciate you. And I'm here if you ever need me. Jeff Walsh, breakingchains.com is my website. I do one-on-one coaching. I do healing sessions. I create meditations for people. I also have packages. So if I can help you in any way, shape, or form, I do have 20-minute consultations, free consultation and coaching calls available currently right now. I don't know how long that's going to be, but I do have those available right now. So check me out. Go to my website, Jeff Walsh, breakingchains.com. Follow me on Facebook, Jeff Walsh Breaking Chains. Follow me on Instagram, Jeff Walsh Breaking Chains, and follow me on TikTok, Jeff Walsh Breaking Chains. On TikTok, I do a daily message generally every day. I try to share a little bit of my story there. And follow me, subscribe to this channel on YouTube. It's going to be under Jeff Walsh Breaking Chains. And thank you. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to the ride. Be blessed.